So after about 500 years of waiting for mail to come, I finally got a switch that I'm going to be installing an M0 Trinket into. The video regarding the mail issue I'm going to cover in another video, but let's go ahead and go to the microscope and see what's going on this switch. Okay, so here is the Trinket. I can see that there are some wires and some rework that has already been done to it. My approach to this is I'm going to remove all these wires because I need to rewire everything and make it look as best as I can, and we'll go from there. Now that I got these wires removed, I'm going to go ahead and take the rest of the switch apart so we can actually start soldering this M0 Trinket in. I forgot to mention, if it wasn't clear in the beginning, that this switch was mailed in from a subscriber and a fan of mine, and I appreciate you, dude. You were amazing. He actually also sent me a second Trinket that I can put in my switch, and I'm like overjoyed for that. He also mentioned that he had removed this capacitor here, and we're gonna have to install a new cap here, and that's no problem. We're gonna have to clean up this area, so let's do that now. And we're gonna use the finest flux on the market, Amtech 559 ASM flux. We're gonna go ahead and take our iron and sop up some of this solder on the end of this capacitor here. There we go. All right, here is a donor switch. We're gonna pull this capacitor right here. This M92 is literally ready to go, but our cap is not. What in the world, man? Come on, there it is. Before we install this, I'm actually gonna remove the Trinket entirely because I do not wanna burn or do anything crazy because I'm gonna be using a lot of heat here. The goal is we wanna get the cap in the general vicinity and get that nice and hot. Okay, there it is. All right, I'm gonna clean up with some isopropyl alcohol and a brush. Let's get rid of that old flux. Now we can go ahead and clear this with some alcohol. We're gonna have to install this a slightly different way. So yeah, pretty much alcohol took off all the adhesive. I didn't realize that. So I'm gonna have to figure out a different way to mount this chip. That's not a big deal though. So I suppose first things first, we can solder the ground. Now the wire I'm going to be using for this is 38 gauge wire, and it has an enamel coating. So when we go ahead and solder to it, it'll look like it's just bare copper wire, but it actually does have an enamel. Okay. All right. Kind of soldered it to the USB-C port. In all honesty, it doesn't matter if it went to the USB-C port or not, because the USB-C, this entire area is all ground. So there we go. We can do our data plus, data minus now. So these are probably the two easiest solder points to solder to. I'm just kidding. They're not. These are going to be a little bit harder to solder to, but they shouldn't be too difficult. I feel like if you like to solder tiny things, this will be very easy to solder to for you. So we got those two things coated up here. Solder these two ends here. Apply two solder blobs here to these 2 points. There we go. So if we look at the diagram, we're going to start with the green one. We got to get rid of some of the enamel. There we go. We're going to bring this right up here. We're going to bring this and go ahead and just burn off some of the enamel and get that soldered in just right there. Beautiful. Go ahead and cut the wire here with a X-Acto knife. We'll go ahead and solder our second wire here. Try to get it as uniform as we can. Okay. And cut that. Beautiful. I'll go ahead and just alcohol this area here and get rid of all the old flux. For the next one, we're going to be soldering in the Joy-Con strap. So for this wire, we actually have to run it like a decent distance across the board. There we go. I'm going to run this wire. I want to do my best to get it, because I want to solder mask this wire down into place. All the wires that have to travel a great distance, I want to make sure I mask them because I don't want them flopping around on the board. So of you that are familiar with my Joy-Con, what is it? No, the one-wire RCM mod that I did. Yeah, so basically it's the same thing where we have to run the wire to pin 10 of the Joy-Con rail. Basically, to simulate that home button that we have to press, and we got to solder it here. We got to solder the wire right there. Turn the enamel off, and we'll just get this wire soldered in place here. All right, so I got the wire soldered in place. We'll go ahead and clean off the flux here. Now, we have 2 more wires. So one of them is going to go to 0 on the Trinket, and this one is going to be going up for the volume plus to this resistor right here. So if you short this line right here to ground, it will actually activate volume up, and you need volume up and this connected to ground in order to boot into RCM mode. All right, let's go ahead and solder our wire for the volume plus bootstrap. There we go. We're gonna just run this loosely over. I will solder mask everything down later. We gotta be extra careful with this little resistor right here because it's a very, very small point. There we go. Now that's soldered, we can go ahead and clean this up here. Alcohol and a brush. Let's go ahead and solder in our 3 volts here. There we go. Kind of loosely run this because we're going to solder mask everything when we're done. Okay, let's go ahead and solder on our 3 volt line here. There we go. And our 3 volt line is soldered in. Let's go ahead and use some isopropyl alcohol and a brush. And just try to clean up this area as best we can. Now we're basically ready to just test this thing out. Our wire's literally legit going everywhere right now. It's crazy. Anyways, we'll test it out before solder masking it all down, and we'll go from there. The gentleman that sent in this switch for the modification / fixing and all of that, he told me that this was his first attempt at attempting to solder something in, and actually the soldering job wasn't half bad compared to what I've done in the past and what I've seen other technicians do. So I wanted to just say I'm very proud of him for even attempting this type of repair and this type of install. This is not an easy thing to install at all. Okay, so I wanted to skip a lot of the testing phase and the solder masking, all of that, because it's not that it's boring, but you guys know how the solder mask works. Most of you do anyways. But I do have the switch here, and I put some Joy-Cons on it for testing, just to make sure everything works. And as you can see, we don't have a RCM loader in the actual USB port, and there's nothing on the right side here, I believe, or it's one of these sides where you put the jig in. So all you do is you push and hold the power button. Okay, and it will boot directly into Hecate. There it is. We can push any button, and there we are. Now we can go in and just launch all of our custom software. Also, I do want to mention, I believe the Trinket was already pre-flashed before we put it in, from what Bryce was saying. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe.